Hi, I'm Cord Bloomquist coming to you from Tall Street Digital, and today I want to talk to you about topical authority, or topic authority as Google calls it. They have to call it that just to be different. Topical authority can help us escape the problem that many think tanks have, which is that they have lots and lots of links pointing to their websites, but not a whole lot of traffic coming from all that authority. So let's dig into that a little bit. Here's a chart from one of the think tanks in our study of about 300 think tanks. And here you can see a group that has 11,000 different domains linking to them. That means that almost every major media outlet in the United States has linked to them at one time or another. And from that, they have almost 400,000 backlinks. I mean, this is gargantuan. Anybody working in SEO, in software as a service, or e-commerce, or some other niche market would drool over this kind of link credibility and link authority and would be able to generate hundreds of thousands or millions of views a month from this. And yet a think tank that has higher quality information to offer is only generating 28,000 views a month. So what's going wrong here? Well, the problem is that links come in from lots of websites to pages on your website, as represented here on the right. And they hit individual pages and they boost up the rating of those pages or the authority of those pages. I'm representing that here by these numbers. Usually individual page authority is rather low, right? But then there's lots and lots of pages on our website that have no links pointing to them. And because we're not linking internally effectively, those pages continue to sort of lie fallow. There's really great information on some pages. There's links coming into other pages. And so the volume of our content simply isn't getting the attention it deserves because it's not being brought along for the ride, so to speak, by the rest of the authority pouring into our website to very few pages. So we can try to solve that by boosting up the authority of some pages with the authority of other pages. This is common and there's nothing fraudulent or SEO spammy about any of this. It makes a lot of sense for pages like a page that maybe defines a term. So let's say you reference the alternative minimum tax and the average reader doesn't know what the heck that is. You can define the alternative minimum tax on a page dedicated to defining that and maybe exploring it and talking about changes to the policy. But other pages like your latest study on X, Y, or Z, it doesn't really make sense for a page from 4 or 5 years ago that has a lot of links to be referencing a study that didn't exist at the time that it was published. It's sort of odd. It's like we went in a time machine and went back 5 years and had one page reference another page from the future. You also can't rake in news results this way because Google doesn't discover those internal links on older pages until much later in its crawling process. And by that time, the news window has closed. So if you want to rank in news, you can't rely on bolstering some very topical page with links from older pages because Google won't discover those in time for it to matter. Instead, we need to rely on something called topical authority. And this is something that Google has been working on for years. You can see here in this graphic from SEMrush, thanks to SEMrush, and I'll link to this article in the notes. Google has been working on this idea of topical authority since around 2011. And Google mentions topics over 250 times in its quality raters guidelines, the rubric that it uses internally to judge the quality of its results, and it specifies that topic authority is vital for ranking in the news. In fact, Google specifies that topical authority is necessary for keywords focused on things like health, finance, or politics. It mentions things like content that talks about our institutions or might affect faith in our institutions. So basically, anything that think tanks write about is something that needs to have topical authority behind it. We need to have topics to have topical authority. But most think tanks are organized to have topics like this, like the sections of a Barnes & Noble bookstore. But these are way too broad for Google. It's not what people search for. Instead, we need to be referencing specific subjects. The Washington Post has innovated in this space by using a thing called natural language processing. Natural language processing reads through, so to speak, each post on the site and identifies things within them, like people or places or organizations. We do this with our own plugin to find things like agencies, statutes, executive rule making, Supreme Court decisions. And then you can create an architecture for a website that looks something like this. Topic pages are linked to from lots and lots of archive pages as represented below. Those are those big sweeping links coming up to the top. So in this example, every time we mention Joe Biden, those pages are tagged with Joe Biden and link back to the Joe Biden topic page. And from there, the Joe Biden topic page links to the most recent pieces that we write on Joe Biden. Same thing with individual pieces of legislation like the American Recovery Act, or with agencies like the Department of Justice. But what list of topics should we use? I'd suggest that we use the master list of topics that Google itself has created, called the Knowledge Graph. It's a way of connecting concepts together. So not only do we get a big list of people, places, things, organizations, all the things that think tanks write about, we get them in a way that's connected. So in this example, we're looking at things familiar to you, the works of Harrison Ford, Star Wars, Blade Runner. How do these things connect? Harrison Ford is a male. Tom Simpson is a male. Tom Simpson is from the United Kingdom. Ridley Scott was a director of Blade Runner, and Ridley Scott is from the United Kingdom, right? All these concepts, you can crawl around connection to connection and figure out how these individual nodes are related to each other. In Google's parlance, these are called nodes and edges, or entities and edges. And that allows Google to understand our own content, so it knows things like, this commentary on a Supreme Court decision deals with the major questions doctrine, and that major questions doctrine case is related to Amy Coney Barrett, who wrote a concurrence, and Justice Roberts, who maybe wrote the opinion, and they're related to Joe Biden, and that Biden was one of the people in that case, Nebraska v. Biden. With this knowledge, then Google can suss out things that otherwise it wouldn't be able to do. In this case, we can type in something like Biden major questions, and we're not given search results on major questions that people want to ask Biden as in significant questions, but rather it understands that we're asking for something related to the major questions doctrine. Similarly, we can type in major questions Barrett, and we get a link to Biden v. Nebraska and the major questions doctrine. We can even type in things extremely oblique, silly sort of search queries like lady on Supreme Court Trump hired, and it knows that we're talking about Amy Coney Barrett. Not because there's necessarily a page, and I doubt that this Wikipedia page specifically says that Trump hired this lady for the Supreme Court, right? But Google understands that Amy Coney Barrett is a woman, that a lady is another word for woman. It understands that Trump appointed her, so in a sense, Trump hired her for the Supreme Court. This allows us to create pages and not worry about optimizing around individual little terms because Google understands more of the meaning behind things than it would otherwise. With this, we've been able to do things like increase the traffic on the Federal Society by almost 100% over the course of 2 years, doubling their web traffic by organizing content around things like Supreme Court decisions. So every time a Supreme Court decision is detected within an article, it's added to an index and related to that court case. And this not only works for the sites that we've managed, so I don't want to just cite our own work, but when I was looking into creating software around this sort of thing, I looked at lots of different magazines, and I found that the New Republic had tons of tags at the bottom of their pages. So I used the Wayback Machine to investigate their tag index.xml file. And I found that about 2 years ago, they went from a couple dozen or a couple hundred tags to well over 50,000. So what was the effect of that? They also doubled their traffic. So in this chart, here's where the New Republic starts out in this dashed orange circle, and their circle moves to the right, but also moving up in value, which suggests that they're not just grabbing long tail terms, but they're competing for really competitive search terms as well. So to review, what do we need to stand out in search? We not only need high quality content and links, but we need those things coming together on every page. Many think tanks have lots of links and lots of high quality content, but because they're not combining those together in a way that makes sense to Google, they're not getting the traffic that they deserve. The best way to do that that's most sustainable isn't running around manually creating lots of links between lots of different pages in a way that might be unnatural and a little strange, but instead to exhaustively tag your website with all sorts of topics. Not only is this useful to Google in that it can now relate the things on your page back to its knowledge graph and gain deeper understanding, but it's useful to users. That's usually our rule. Outside of a few things like making the website visible to Google, there's very little that we do that benefits solely Google. We try to benefit both the user and the search algorithm. So with that, I encourage you all to like and subscribe. Please message me if you have questions about SEO that you'd like answered. I've been Cord Bloomquist coming to you from Tall Street Digital. Thanks, everyone.